Thank you so much to our friends at earthday.org for that wonderful talk. And it's so wonderful that you get so many young voices from so many regions across the continent. So thank you so much for bringing these stories to life. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, also bringing human stories to life, Subhra Priyadarshini. Subhra is the chief editor of Nature India, where she has led the publication since its launch in 2008. She's a trained physicist turned award-winning science journalist and has reported extensively on science, health, and climate from across the continent. Her work brings scientific insights together with human stories, making complex issues accessible, urgent, and deeply personal. In this session, she will take us on a journey to one of the most remote and fragile regions of Earth, the Everest region of Nepal, where she travelled to understand the real-time impacts of climate change on both people and the environment, blending science, lived experience, and voices from the front line. Here she asks the urgent question, can science help protect those who protect the roof of the world? Please join me in welcoming Subhra Priyadarshini.
Generous introduction, and thank you for having me here. It's such a fantastic program to get the young initiated into climate action. Um, a science journalist essentially is a queer beast. You work to decode science, break news about science, question and critique science at the same time, but you're not a scientist. So scientists often are like, okay, you are a journalist. So let's see what you know about science. And in the newsroom on the other side, there are more glamorous beats, politics, sports, crime, finance, and science comes very low in the priority. So science journalists are pushing to create a space for themselves on either side of the spectrum. Um, as an environment and climate journalist, I've reported from many climate front lines, um, places which are facing climate emergency. But today, I'm going to talk about the Everest region, which is where I mentored a boot camp of 8 science journalists from across South Asia to the fragile climate front line in the Himalayas to see and report firsthand how climate change impacts the region and why there's no guidance for the residents yet. Um, so you'll see a number of pictures scrolling behind as I speak, and they are self-explanatory about my trip to the Everest region. And I mentioned the boot camp which I mentored. So these were science journalists from across South Asia, and we went in April 2022. We trekked to the Everest region in Nepal to understand the effects of climate change on the world's third pole. Now, why are the Himalayas called the third pole, you may ask? That's primarily because they hold the largest reserve of fresh water outside the Arctic and Antarctic regions. So the Himalayan region, including the Hindu Kush and the Tibetan Plateau, contains over 55,000 glaciers like these, storing vast amounts of water, fresh water, as ice and snow. And these are comparable in scale, though not quite equal, to the polar ice caps. The glaciers of the third pole feed some of Asia's largest rivers, including the Ganga, also called the Ganges, Brahmaputra, Indus, Yangtze, and Mekong, and they sustain over 1.9 billion people downstream across multiple countries in Asia. Like the Arctic and Antarctic, the Himalayas are extremely sensitive to climate change. They are warming at twice the global average, causing an accelerated glacial melt. There's threatened water security and agriculture and biodiversity. So the region basically plays a key role in regulating global and regional climate. It influences all the monsoon patterns and the carbon storage in the region. It's quite fragile. The ecosystem is quite fragile, and it has global ecological implications, just like the poles. So the third pole is not just a metaphor being used. It's a recognition of the region's strategic climate, its hydrological and ecological importance in the region. Now, while I have reported from other countries for climate change or the climate emergency, the submerging mangrove islands of the Sundarban in the Bay of Bengal, of course, and from the other side of the Himalaya in India, then the subcontinent's fragile coastlines in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, and of course, many significant extreme weather events in the region, including the Odisha supercyclone of 1999 and the Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004. But this trek was quite different. It was on tough, rugged terrain at nearly 4,500 meters above sea level, with no other means of transport apart from your legs. And this region is quite remote, as you can see in the pictures, making it very difficult to reach and carry photo and video equipment alongside your usual trekker's rucksack. It was also the highest altitude I have physically scaled in my journalistic career. Before I went to the region as a science journalist, my reportage of the Everest region was primarily drawn from secondary sources such as academic research. There were reports and the very few scientists working in this region. And this trip basically gave me a chance to look at the effects of climate change firsthand on the ecosystems and on the people inhabiting the region. Along the way, of course, we all met villagers, we met we met all kinds of people. We were always invited to into their kitchens for some dal bhat, rice and lentils, and the slogans for trekkers is dal bhat power 24-hour, meaning if you've had a hearty meal of rice and lentils, it can power you for the next 24 hours. Or then they'd offer you chai, tea, very much needed in the bitter cold, but it's a diuretic, so you know not to consume more than you should, or else you'll have to take very frequent pee breaks. And then, of course, we befriended Sherpa porters who carry hundreds of kilos of weight up and down these rugged and icy expanses. They are your guides, your saviors, your jolly good fellas who'd kind of regale you with Nepali and English music at the end of the day's trek. And despite your sore bodies and feet, they'd somehow magically, you know, can energize you into an impromptu dance party at the end of the day. So I did also meet a lot of local administrators and political leaders who were campaigning for elections. It was pre-election time, and we got to hear their environmental and climate agendas for the region, which was sadly not much. Um, I met mountaineers, agriculture workers, school teachers, scientists, and children along the way. We heard what climate change means to them, what they feel about the warming Himalayas, about the local temperature increasing every year, the glaciers melting faster than they should or they usually do, or even then the tree lines on the mountains shifting. So where trees used to, some species of the trees used to grow in earlier times, It's on either higher or lower altitudes that they're growing. So the overwhelming response of the local people in the Everest region was that they, the protectors and worshippers of the mountains, were hardly responsible for any of these changes, but were still at the receiving end of nature's what they call changing moods. Um, they are steeped in a culture and religious belief that inherently preaches conservation of all living creatures and natural resources. And these indigenous mountain communities, they fiercely protect their terrain, but have now resigned to the vulnerabilities of a warming planet. I came back with a bag full of stories from the Everest region and a very deep philosophical question to myself as a journalist and for scientists. Can science or scientists help create a safe haven for these people who protect for us the very roof of the world, which supports the lives of billions of people in Asia? So yes, there have been, realizations along the way, and some of the stories that I did after coming back from the Himalayas have basically been around these reminiscences, these kinds of realizations that I've had during the trek. We have some questions, and this Amina, who's 15 years old from Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan, who says, your photos show a beautiful but fragile place. What were the moments during your trip that made you feel most hopeful? Well, and then there's Dilnoza, who's 21 years old from Samarkand in Uzbekistan, who's also asking, you've seen so many climate front lines. How do you stay motivated when the situation feels overwhelming? Um, As a journalist covering the escalating climate crisis from these climate front lines like the Himalayas, it is natural for me or my colleagues who do similar stuff to feel quite overwhelmed by the magnitude of the challenges that local people face and local ecosystems face. But there's actually a term now which is called climate anxiety that you may be familiar with, which basically describes how you feel as an individual when confronted with these climate emergencies. However, there are several avenues through which our reporting can bring hope and drive meaningful change. One of them is through what is recognized as constructive and solutions journalism. So, traditional journalism, as you know, often emphasizes the problems, what is going wrong, which can lead to public desensitization and sometimes disengagement from the issues. In contrast, constructive journalism focuses on solutions. It provides context, it provides the progress, the actionable insights without compromising on the rigor of journalism. This approach basically empowers audiences rather than leaving them feeling helpless. So it involves rigorous evidence-based reporting on responses to social problems. It highlights the effective strategies and innovations and inspires action among readers. To answer your question more directly, I saw hope when I met school children like yourself in the region who are found much more aware of the impacts of climate change in the region. Some of them, like Mingma Sherpa, a girl whose song is part of one of my journalistic pieces from the Everest, said something that will stay with me forever. She said, it's not us or our people who created this mess of climate change, but we realize that we will indeed have to fix it with resolute action. Another reason for hope for me is bridging the gap between science and local communities that science journalists often do. If you read one of these articles, it points to a critical issue. Residents like Kanchi Sherpa, who are unaware of the scientific realities of climate change affecting their environment. So, by translating complex scientific data from this region into accessible narratives that connects to local experiences, journalistic stories like the ones that I'm mentioning, they try to make the information more relatable and actionable for these communities. So, in embracing these kinds of approaches, our work can transcend mere reporting. It becomes a sort of catalyst for awareness, for resilience, and change in the face of climate adversity. There's another question from Temirlan, who's 17 years old, from Almaty in Kazakhstan. What do you think young people in Central Asia can do to protect the mountains and rivers that connect us to the Himalayas? Thank you for that lovely question, Temirlan. As you know, responsible journalism from these front lines always highlights community resilience and adaptation. And Tamilan, that's quite a profound question actually. And while the challenges are significant for all of us, many communities are, developing innovative adaptation strategies. Um, my job, or people like me who report on these climate exigencies, is to report on these efforts also, not only showcasing their resilience but also providing models that other communities like yourself can emulate and have a sense of shared purpose and probably possibility. You're from Kazakhstan, and the mountains and rivers of Central Asia and the Himalayas are part of the same ancient pulse. They share water, climate, they share culture, and the very same vulnerabilities. Now, young people like yourself can do several things. They can sort of become river guardians. They can monitor local water quality. They can look at glacier-fed river flow and pollution. Citizen science is quite powerful these days, and apps and grassroots mapping projects can basically help build shared data for your regions. You can protect glaciers locally, but it can have global ramifications. They can act globally. So climate change is melting glaciers, as you know, across both Central Asia and the Himalayas. Mm, So organizing for clean energy, advocating for, say, fossil fuel expansion, against fossil fuel expansion, and pushing for climate resilient policies in your regions at home all can help. You can revive and share mountain knowledge. Indigenous and local mountain communities have centuries of wisdom about how to live with snow, ice, water, as was evident in the Everest region villages for me. Young people can document these, preserve these, and reconnect that knowledge across borders. So it's not just your region, but you can reach out to transboundary mountain alliances. You can join or start youth networks focused on mountain protection. You can work with students, scientists, and NGOs in countries like Nepal, India, Pakistan, Kyrgyzstan, Bhutan, because rivers don't stop at borders. So you can tell your story. You can use film, poetry, podcasts, or even journalism to show how climate and hydrogeological changes are reshaping your landscapes. The Himalayas are not just over there somewhere, they are in every raindrop and snowpack that feeds, say, the Amu Darya, Sir Darya, and beyond. So yeah, you could do all of that. I think there's another question from a teacher. Um, no, it's from Gul Bahar, from Dushanbe in Tajikistan. How can journalists tell climate stories that make people really care and act? Um, you could advocate for, through your journalism for policy change, through your storytelling. Effective journalism can always, in some way, influence policy by bringing attention to the issue at hand, um, to the underreported issues. So by telling these compelling stories that humanize the impacts of climate change, you can galvanize public opinion and in turn sometimes pressure policymakers to take action. Um, you could you could also make change through your stories by making these more relatable to the public and try and figure out what exactly is the thing that is disturbing those areas. So I think there's also another question I can see. Murad, who's a teacher from Ashgabat in Turkmenistan. What advice would you give to educators trying to teach students about climate change in a way that feels real and local? Um, well, I was in Ladakh doing a piece on climate change in the region, and a young woman said to me, um, we used to play on the frozen river. Now it barely freezes. Um, these are the kinds of quotes. And there's a regular refrain among coastal communities in the Sundarbans, and that is the sea used to be just 1 kilometer away. Now it's in our backyard. And we have shifted our house so many times in so many years just so that we can save our home and hearth from the rising tides, from the shifting coastline. Uh, these memories say more about climate change um, than any graph or scientific paper can. So my advice is ask your student what has changed in the landscape that they love. Is it a disappearing bird somewhere? Is it an early flowering season? Is that an undrinkable stream? What is it? What is it that climate change is bringing home? Climate change becomes real when it's about home. Encourage them to interview elders, track seasonal changes, map their own watershed, things like those. Also, link big science to lived experience. In the Everest region story, which I encourage all of you to go and read on Nature India, glacier loss and changing permafrost, changing snowmelt in the Himalayas are reshaping everything farming, their culture, their festivals, even the future of the whole valleys. Um, you can do the same locally, show how global warming affects your crops. Climate change affects your rains, your power supply, your water taps. Um, and finally, maybe let students feel powerful, not helpless. In the Himalayas, students are working with local environmentalists to restore and map glacial springs. That's on the Sikkim side of Himalayas in India. That's science in action and science and collective action together. So give your students real life projects instead of theoretical projects where they can monitor, they can advocate, or even repair, or make a school garden or rainwater tank that can build climate confidence in them and some hope for the future. So I would say teach climate like it's about them, because it is. And ultimately, they are the ones who are the vanguards of our future planet. So I think with that, I would urge everyone to read more popular science, popular journalism in mainstream media, as well as specialized media like ourselves and Nature India. There are other websites that people from around Asia who are the audiences right now, I can see can see. There's Nature Middle East. For a global perspective, we could go to Nature Climate Change. There's Nature Africa, which showcases everything about Africa. So do read these to inform yourself. These are popular pieces written in your language, written in language that translates science from its so-called ivory tower to something that everybody can understand. So that's all. I think we will have more conversations when we have the actual climate challenge happening in Oxford. I look forward to that, and thank you very much for giving me this platform.